if you had to break Descartes' argument on thought process and discourse, if you had to break it down into like one thing, because he says a lot of different things.
Yeah.
Like, what do you think? Because I was trying earlier to think of like, if he's making one argument here, what is it?
Yeah.
And I couldn't figure out what one argument was.
Yeah. I think it's more like maybe like one like process of thought, like how to think about something.
Yeah.
Because let's just go from part one. In part one, he's talking about how institutionally he feels like dissatisfied with organized thought, like organized learning, how they're learning more Aristotelian logic. And he was saying that like it's not going to progress them anywhere. It's just going to reaffirm stuff we already know. And I think I know for certain he's trying to strip down all the stuff he's ever learned. That's why he leaves his teachers at a super young age to like come to one point of certainty to then branch off, to then we can start from here and then progress. And that has to be, I think, therefore I am. I think that's the culmination of the entire book, saying like, there's this one certainty I know for sure. Like I can think about all the other stuff I want to, but the progress of from thinking to something else, that leap, that requires some kind of faith there. But knowing that I am thinking about it is the only certainty he has. And I thought that was really interesting. That's really rare when it comes to modern philosophy.
Right.
But I think for the time it was revolutionary. It had to be.
I mean, I also feel that like part of his thing with like institutional thought or like congregational thought, I feel like he kind of thinks it doesn't exist, especially like with, he makes the analogy to like the city, right? Of like, part of why the laws in the society of Sparta works is because it's pushed forward by one thought, like by one
mind.
Yeah, one mind. And the idea of like a city being built increment by increment, like I think that's what he sees institutional thought as.
Yeah.
Like by a group of people, not as like a bunch of minds pushing one thought together, but instead a bunch of little small pieces, like almost breaking down the idea of institutional thought as like an idea.
Yeah. I think it would, just to get into the mind of Descartes a little bit, I think it would be almost irrational for him to think nothing can be made through conglomerates. Like I think there's no way. I think it's more so like the quality of what's being built. Like let's say you like make a building and you have 9 people doing it, and there's not like one way to do it. Like there's not one person saying build it this way. It'll all be built differently. I think he's saying like to have one cohesive like building, you would need one mind to do so. Okay, I know like in part 6, which we were talking about a little bit earlier about how it's contradictory. The entire book is pretty much contradictory. And in part 2, he was saying that like you would need one mind to kind of push forward any kind of thought, or thought as a school of thought. But then in part 6, he was saying, I'm writing this so people after me can like carry the torch. And like that seems to me contradictory. How I kind of remedied that in my mind was him saying like the mind itself, like the one mind that is pushing it forward, is still Descartes. He's just using people after him as like workers. Like,
right. He's
giving them the blueprint to like, you start with this foundation, now you guys continue to keep pushing forward. But even that didn't feel like sufficient to me. It still feels a little contradictory in minds, but kind of you got to give it to him a little bit. I mean, it's a hard task to do what he was trying to do.
I mean, I feel like in a similar vein though, like there's no questioning that like a lot of his reasoning for the things that he says in Discourse is sound.
Yeah.
And he walks through his thought process in writing. Like, it's easy to follow, and yet for some reason it's contradictory. So part of me also feels like everything that he says can be broken down and remedied by something, but it seems that he doesn't even know what the remedy is to the things that he's saying. He's just like, here are the things that I know and here's what they lead me to.
Yeah.
But
tough one.
Typically those things themselves are contradictory, and like we were talking about earlier, like the work itself is like a contradiction.
Yeah.
Because he's talking about how he doesn't feel that you should follow anybody else's logic, and yet he's saying like, here's my logic on Discourse. And so like the work itself is a contradiction.
Yeah.
So how do you even remedy that?
They're really, I think that itself. I also just think the entire like, maybe it's not that his thought process or what he was proposing was contradictory. It was more so like the pursuit itself is. Like, let's say for a fallible human to say, I need to come to a place of certainty to learn more things. I don't even think it's possible for something fallible to have an infallible thought at all. So like maybe him trying to have like a place of certainty, that itself is contradictory itself. Like I know in part 2, it says right here, I kind of put it in my notes, but he like lists out maxims. And the first maxim was accept nothing that is fickle. If it's not like something that is certain, you can't use it as a block. But he has 3 maxims after that to me, how do you even get past the first maxim? How do you even know what is certain at all? Like I feel like that's the entire, like for the last year and a half, I've been reading a ton of epistemology stuff, theory of knowledge, and really for an entire other project I'm doing. But reading epistemology it's like mind bending because they'll write 500-page books, similar to how Descartes has a ton of metaphysical writings about how we know things. And they're all fallible. We're all fallible human beings. It makes absolutely no sense to me. Like, how do you feel about I think, therefore I am as like a concept? Like, do you think that's like enough grounds to continue thought process on?
I mean, I feel like that's his biggest contradiction in the whole text, because he talks about how he can, like, I mean, the entire I think therefore I am has become such like a pop culture phrase.
Let's stop there. I absolutely hate that though. I hate when people try and take like the cool stuff from text and just like, I think therefore I am. Like,
I think it's lost a lot of its value and it's been watered down, but the idea itself is that because I have a mind, because I am conscious, because I am present, I therefore like exist.
Yeah.
But to make a metaphysical argument at all, which Descartes is incredibly fond of,
the
metaphysical argument of being.
He loves it.
To do that at all, you have to question whether we exist in a current state or time in the first place.
What existence means.
Right, and like the idea, this even goes back to the city analogy of like, even if we all do exist in states of consciousness, if our state of consciousness is similar at all, like if my purple is your purple, and if a brick looks to me like a brick looks to you, or if the labels that we have put on things just give us a way to define the same things to each other that are incredibly different. Mm-hmm. And so the phrase I think therefore I am, I think holds a lot of value in thought process and in discourse, because otherwise you don't have a base of certainty, because then everything else falls through. And without a base you can't make an argument. But at the same time, like that, I feel like that's the biggest contradiction in the whole work.
Yeah, I think the more I kind of thought about it, because I mean, he's, as much as we're saying it's contradictory in thought and we're kind of attacking the text a little bit, he's still like the modern father of epistemology. Like, there has to be a certain base there to kind of ground off of. But if we like kind of look at, I think, therefore I am, from other perspectives, it almost presupposes that everyone is sane as well. Because I mean, there's always been the argument of like neurology to where everyone's a little off, not everyone's brain isn't cognitively working the same. And I know Foucault, the French philosopher, I've read, well, they're both French, but he's more modern than Descartes. But he has a book called Archaeology of Knowledge. In Manners and Civilization, he kind of tackles it in both. But he critiques Descartes' position a ton, and like he implements the idea of madness, saying, if you're mad or you can't even ground your own sanity, I think therefore I am goes out of the window instantly. Like, it's not even at that point you can't even trust what you're thinking. And if you're relying on thinking to be the base for your ideas, you kind of come into an irredeemable spot to even ground anything. But I guess when you think about it, like if you look at it from the other way, just trying to help Descartes here. Do you think like thinking that you are insane or knowing you are insane is still thinking? Because then Descartes'
That's dense,
position,
man. That's dense.
because then Descartes' position wouldn't be wrong. If you say I think therefore I am, and you critique it with Foucault's position saying, what if you're mad or what if you're insane? If I know I'm insane and I know I can't trust my reasoning, I'm still thinking.
Right.
So I know I exist.
Right.
Now you probably couldn't build anything off of that, but I think the maxim is still there. Tough one, man.
Yeah, like what's your state of being? I mean,
Sheesh.
I feel like that argument is even broken down if we take a work of fiction in like Crime and Punishment. Because, like, Raskolnikov, the protagonist, if you can call him that,
Yeah,
even though he's kind of the antagonist, if somebody hasn't read it, like, he essentially rationalizes a murder that he does in the first chapter and makes one of the most irrational yet sensical arguments for what he does possible.
Yeah.
And he's insane, but his thought process is incredibly concrete.
That's tough. That also reminds me of another Dostoevskian character, the Underground Man, because he's also like clearly not all the way there.
Yeah.
But he has the best possible reasoning for it.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm insane and I know I'm insane. It almost makes life, you're living a life through the lens of an unreliable narrator, but at least you know you're unreliable.
Yeah.
So I feel like Descartes' position, this is why I think he's the father of epistemology. Like Plato, Aristotle, like they were doing it, people were doing it before him, but I think therefore I am is like fascinating in concept because any critique you throw at it, you're thinking about the critique,
right?
Or you're thinking about the position it holds in your mind. Now, I think that it's shaky because Descartes was using this as like a universal way of thought, where it's like if you think, therefore you are, as in everybody is like this. If you think, therefore you are. I feel like you were just saying that like I can't prove to you that white is the same for me as it is for you, or that walls look the same for me as they do for you. But at least to know, like, for myself, if I use I think therefore I am individually, I think it's an absolutely great philosophy. One that's absolutely airtight when it comes to like thought process. But if I try to apply it to someone else and I can't ground their mind being like mine, it almost like falls short. Because I can't tell you to think about the same thing I'm thinking about in the same way. We can't even ground other minds. Like,
Right.
It's tough. But shout out Descartes though.
I mean, part of Descartes' whole argument too is like grounding like what is thought and how do we get there. So like in the same way, I feel he's almost using his argument of I think therefore I am to push more for, because I don't think he says that till part 4 or part 3 or part 4.
I think it might be 3.
And so like the whole idea of I think therefore I am is then like used to push forward what he's talking about in part 1 and part 2.
Yeah.
Is it not?
Oh, I see what you mean. Like it would only attach to what is the precursor.
Yeah. Yeah, in part 4.
Bro, all my tabs fell out of my book. It's so annoying.
Yeah, in part 4 he brings up the idea.
Oh, I got it. I think therefore I am is it's in part 4.
Yeah.
I knew to be such. I thought.
But even to push forward his argument, in part 3, paragraph 26, he says, when he's talking about his maxims, his third maxim is always try and conquer yourself rather than fortune, and to change my desires rather than the order of the world, and generally to accustom myself to believing that there is nothing that is completely within our power except our own thoughts.
Yeah.
And so like being, in a sense, is like a rationalization of how your world adheres to you.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
can you navigate the world without thinking or being?
I think this is also where it kind of gets a little dicey for people that don't have a universal grounding for their knowledge. Because me being theist, I can kind of, same with Descartes. I mean, you can ground reality being sustained. You can ground universality of nature. You can ground the future being like the past, all with an ultimate sustainer. You can ground it through God.
Right.
But with no God, I think that's why in part 4 he had to create a proof for God. Because in parts 1 through 3, or mainly part 3, but we can just say 1 through 3 for safe conversation, he was proposing things to where like we can only start at a place of certainty, then progress, or look at things to be infallible and continue on that path. Words like infallible and words like certain, you can't ground that without something to ground it in. Like the universal, as in where it's like whenever you see like 2 chairs and then 2 pencils, what's connecting those 2 in your mind isn't what you're seeing. It's not the senses you're seeing, because your senses could lie. You're connecting the universal of 2-ness. Like the concept of 2 is what you're connecting. And that has to be grounded somewhere else. And he's kind of tackling that throughout the entire text. But in part 4, he has to provide a proof for God, because without it literally everything before that would just fall apart. So I think that's why it gets tricky for people that read it with no universal grounding, because it's like, I can't even apply what he's saying.
Yeah.
Unless you want to propose like an eternal universe, maybe, which I'm not opposed against. There's probably arguments for it, but you have to ground it somewhere. If there's no grounding, even Descartes' position will fall apart.
I mean, I think Therefore I Am is also like pretty adamantly removed from the context of the source material, like because it's used everywhere. And in Foucault's argument, he like pretty heavily removes it from the idea of discourse in the first place. And it starts part 4, but by the end of part 4, it almost takes on a different meaning of like, I think therefore he is.
Yeah.
And like, I think therefore God is, which I think is essentially his point.
Yeah, I think there's definitely 2 things going on. I think Therefore I Am is definitely, to sum up the initial question that was given, I think, but like what you just said, like I think therefore he is that's a great way to sum up his metaphysical argument for God. We can kind of touch on the argument as well. Basically what he was saying is that nothing greater can come from something lesser. Mm-hmm. So if you can conceive in your mind an infinite and universal being with all the omni properties, you know how God is proposed in pretty much every institutional religion. If you can conceive an infinite being in your mind and you are admittedly fallible, something that's greater than you has to be putting that in your mind, because you can't create something, you can't conjure something that's greater than yourself. So if you can think of God in your head, it must be therefore coming from God. Powerful argument. I've seen ways to kind of get around it. A lot of them rely on grounding stuff outside of God though, which is a whole other argument. But I do think that argument is like really fascinating, because you almost conjure God yourself. Like you create it in your head. Yeah. And if you can think of the biggest, grandest, most magnificent being in your head, and you see it as greater than yourself, you've like created God in your head. Absolutely insane.
Therefore, like also creating the argument of like, if we don't think, does God exist?
I think it's also what you're thinking about too. Because wait, this looking gets into other things of like other universals, right? Like stuff that's What about like if you try and conjure love in your mind?
Right.
I think that could also apply here. Because we always think of love as way bigger than ourselves. And if something greater can come from something lesser, you're conjuring something greater than yourself. And maybe that's what it means in like, you know, in theology, of like God being love or God being a concept like that.
Right.
Because it's greater than the fallible man. So the fallible man can conjure love in their mind or conjure mercy in their mind or conjure goodness or joy in their mind. These are things greater than the man. I can kind of see that kind of being linked, more Augustinian in thought though.
Yeah. I mean, and similar to the Augustine process of thought of a relationship without love is one without God. Which is a whole other metaphysical argument we can get into later.
A whole other argument.
Before we continue, this episode is sponsored by St. John's College.
Thank you.
In Santa Fe and Annapolis. Braxton and I recently visited St. John's College.
Great experience, by the way. Let's just put that out there.
Excellent
One of my favorite experiences ever.
St. John's is really cool. They are America's Great Books College and entirely based around a curriculum built off of great books. Everybody studies the same things, and this episode is specifically sponsored by their school in Santa Fe. Incredibly beautiful place. Do you want to talk about the experience of like being in the environment?
No, definitely. So I think really what started this entire thing with me and Sam is that I had went to a seminar of them talking about Descartes, and I was like,
Discourse on Method specifically.
Oh yeah, Discourse on Method. Yeah, let's go ahead and
shout out Hackett Publishing.
But yeah, I was listening on Discourse on Method in a seminar, and I've never seen so many like pursuing minds go after a certain topic. And the topic was super in depth, like talking about what knowledge is. And something that in regular conversation you have in day to day, like it would instantly be turned off. Like after 2 seconds, it's like, okay, we're going to eat later. Yeah. But they were like really going in depth on this topic, and it just made me think like, yo, I know me and Sam could probably murder this topic. So
yeah,
when did Sam about it?
If you're getting close to college and you enjoy conversations like this is literally what St. John's is. A text that they study is Discourse on Method, and they just have
Descartes too.
They have really long conversations like this, and everything kind of revolves around, you have like a discussion question, and you just dive in for a long time. They'll literally, like, I've seen them spend hours talking about 5 pages of a text.
Mine was 2.5 hours, man.
I went to a Brothers K seminar in Annapolis. It was 2 hours long, and they talked about half of a chapter, which is so awesome. So shout out St. John's. Thank you for sponsoring this episode on Discourse on Method.
Thank you guys, man.
I'm going to read you this quote, and I want you to tell me what it makes you think. This is top of page 19.
Okay.
Thus this I, that is to say, the soul through which I am what I am, is entirely distinct from the body, and is even easier to know than the body. And even if there was no body at all, it would not cease to be all that it is.
I think, so I have in my notes here, this idea of like the separation between the soul and the body, super Platonic in thought. Because if you read like Phaedrus or maybe some of the earlier Plato dialogues, or dated earlier, none of us know, but dated earlier dialogues, Socrates almost like wanted to die because he wanted to say like, this entire concept I have of the forms of like the perfect ideals, I can't access it here. And the soul won't stop being what it is after the body passes. So when he dies, he says, I can finally go be with the forms that I want to be with. So whenever I read that initially, it instantly made me think about how like we're all in the same, at least in the West, epistemology is in the same lineage coming from Plato, where it's like, if you have a separation of the soul in the body, and you see the soul as being greater than the body, it turns into an entire line of thought of like, maybe that's where perfection is at then, because there's no blemishes on the soul. Whenever the body passes, because that's the one with actual bruises and cuts and blemishings, maybe that's what's gonna die, the soul won't. Now we're getting the entire incarnation of Christ and all kind of crazy stuff. But I just thought that the entire concept of breaking the soul and the body was fascinating. Reminded me a lot of Plato.
Yeah. I mean, it's similar. I mean, what you're talking about with Socrates, very similar to like that of, I mean, all kinds of philosophers. I mean, and theologists like Saint Paul is constantly obsessed with the idea of death and the famous quote, "To live is Christ and to die is gain." Just like the idea that the imperfection of life is the brutality of confinement within the body. I just pulled that off the dome. I hope that was impressive.
I can't lie. Top 5, man. Top 5.
And like, yeah, I'm curious. Do you align with the idea that the body and the soul are two inherently separate things?
Yeah, surely. I mean,
do you think the soul exists before the body does?
Yeah, definitely. I think the only thing that can die is the body.
Right.
So, and obviously that would mean like, you know, by proxy that there's no beginning for the soul either, unless, I mean, I've seen some arguments for souls being created. I don't know if I fully agree with that. I'm still kind of wrestling with that. That's more like, I think like Coptic theology.
Yeah.
But I definitely think they're separate, mostly because if you take the Socrates or the Platonic outlook on it, and you say that the soul is everlasting because it never has any blemishes on it, is the only thing that is, it's the only thing that can kind of sense and feel perfection. Like whenever there's an argument he has, and I think it's the Republic, when he was saying like you can only sense and recognize love or sense and recognize the universals with your soul, because you can't feel that in your body. You can't feel love in your body. You feel the you know, like nerve endings and stuff that like sensations, but you can't feel what love actually is through your body. And that makes me feel like if you ask anyone if they've ever felt love before, it makes me feel like in their soul they felt it. There's something immaterial. So I would have to say that I think there is a separation between soul and the body. What about you? You think so?
Yeah, I think so. I feel like also if the soul exists outside of the body after death, then in my opinion, it would have to exist before.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, the idea of the soul going somewhere else, to me, unless your soul stays here on Earth, if it leaves, it's got to be outside of time, right?
No, yeah. I think it's...
And therefore, would it not exist... If it's outside of our concept of time, would it not be before and after?
Yeah, I think it would have to be everlasting. It would have to be everlasting both ways.
Yeah.
But I hold the position that I think it's everlasting both ways, but I don't know if that would mean that it's not created. Because they could...
No, yeah.
Because everlasting, for at least from a fallible standpoint, it can go back before us and we would see it as infinite. Like, for example, let's say there's something that was here before all conceived things of the material world. And we do posit a God here. So if we propose God at the beginning of all things, even though we can't conceive that, shout out Descartes again. Shout out Descartes. But we have God at the very beginning of the entire concept. And then we have the soul before creation of fallible minds. We would see the soul still as infinite, but it may not be when it comes to creation. So I don't know if the soul's uncreated. God could have created the soul. But I know for sure it's before us. It's before the fallible mind.
Yeah. And a bit of a shout out to next week's conversation. But I feel like it ties into Socrates' argument of innate knowledge.
Oh, and Menno.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, the soul... I feel the soul almost has to exist outside of the body for innate knowledge to be fallible.
Wait, question though, because we're both on the stance here that after death the soul is gonna still be alive.
Yeah.
Alive is loose terms.
Yeah.
All this is loose terms considering that
it's philosophy.
It's philosophy.
You know?
But we're saying alive as like, you know, catch all. But after death the soul still exists. But I can't see the soul now knowing nothing. after death.
Yeah.
So if we say, cause let's say for example,
So is the mind part of the soul?
that's
or the
what I was
body?
about to say.
Yeah.
Maybe like thought and like knowledge is in the soul, because let's say whenever you die, right,
Right.
and you go on to the next realm of life or whatever you go to, I would assume that you have all the knowledge you have right now. But if that's the case, that means the mind that we have or this flesh that we have doesn't hold any knowledge at all. Which I'm fine with that being a reconciliation. I'm fine with that being the reality. And only the soul is the one that has any knowledge. But then that kind of leads to another question, and it kind of goes against Descartes. What he was saying in here is like, if we're saying that anything with a soul or anything with conscious experience, I guess, has innate knowledge, like in the Socratic argument, and then afterwards, I don't believe it to be dumb. So if it has innate knowledge, what about things like plants and animals?
Yeah.
Because if you propose that animals have souls, and we just said knowledge is stored in this soul,
Why are they not walking?
why are
and
they
talking?
not? Why are they not walking? Why would they not be walking and talking?
Yeah.
And then after death, did they have? Because I know the entire. I think part 5 he talks about animals a lot with the Vera Sum, and he was saying that he doesn't believe them to be conscious agents. He doesn't believe them to have the same rational experience that we have. He proposes that like certain birds and animals can repeat stuff to you. They can have retention or stuff like that, but they can't create novel and real organized thoughts back to you because they don't have the rationality to do so.
Right.
So that could be a cool, interesting topic to talk about though.
Page 21, paragraph 37. But what brings it about that there are many people who are persuaded that it is difficult to know this, and also even to know what their soul is that they never lift their minds above sensible things, and that they are so accustomed to consider nothing except by imagining it, which is a way of thinking appropriate for material things, that everything unimaginable seems to them unintelligible.
Everything unimaginable seems to them unintelligible. You know, that thing, that reminds me a lot of like Enlightenment philosophy, right? Because I feel like during the Renaissance, more Renaissance philosophers, they were kind of like only in the realm of metaphysics, you know, like only thinking of stuff outside of the sensible, not relying on the sensory inputs and outputs. But I feel like when the Enlightenment came around, it was more so reason and rationality, which gets more into like Orientalism, to where like, you know, they made the East seem like they were all mystical and fluff and no rationality in the East. Instead, only the Western world is the one doing rational, logical stuff. Whole other topic though, kind of like pisses me off every day. But with the West, it reminds me a lot of the Enlightenment because they wouldn't even imagine things outside of what they could see. It was all empirical. It was only stuff that was strictly stuff you could touch, feel, and hear. And I've never been under that vein of thought before. Now that could just be me being theist, and I believe in miracles, I believe in metaphysics, I believe there's stuff bigger than what we can see, and we can't measure everything that goes on. I don't know how I feel about that vein of thought.
Yeah.
I agree more so with Descartes.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, I feel like in this quote too, also like just raising the idea of if you are not thinking and you are not in a state of being, then you are in a stasis of steady lack of thought, in which, like, if you're not raising your mind above to like reach and like try and pull things down and question them and like all of this stuff, then your mind is confined to only thinking about things that you know, and therefore you cannot imagine anything more, and without that imagination you lack further intelligence.
Yeah, it's almost like you're closing your mind off to what could be, or like,
which also kind of goes against modern thought of intelligence, because the idea of modern thought and intelligence is to be intelligent, you must see things as concrete.
Yeah, have an answer.
Which is like entirely opposite of most classic philosophy.
Yeah.
Especially Socrates, who never gives an answer.
Never. I think another thing that kind of touches
Jesus.
on and Jesus. I think it touches on this the split of East and West as well. Just another like brief, not even sidebar. It's really the same topic. But like I read the Analects recently. Well, for the second time, I've read it twice. And like in the lineage of Confucius, you have like Zunzi and Zhuangzi, Mencius, all these people that rarely give any answers at all. Like Confucius in the Analects, it's like written in aphorism style, and it's like a bunch of fragments where he just talks about like respect, knowledge, the Ren or humaneness, and there might be like 2 answers he gives. He never brings up a deity, never brings up anything bigger than human nature at all, and he never gives any answers. And I think he's constantly telling his like students and his disciples to question everything, but he never gives any answers. He almost like reminds me a lot of Socrates. Both of them really question, like rigorously question everything, and never like. And to me, it's not like they don't have the capabilities of coming to a conclusion. It's like they like have a conclusion and will intentionally dance around it to not land on something.
Yeah.
Like, how do you feel about that pursuit of knowledge, like, in that way? I feel like that's how I've tried to be for the last year, especially getting into more theology, because, you know, like, every time we can get, like, ecumenical councils and all kind of crazy stuff, but, like, anytime the church has ever, like, landed on something that hasn't been the Nicene Creed, it's heresy.
Yeah.
It's almost like, at least in Orthodoxy, it's more, like, apophatic, which means, like, negative theology. And they're trying to, like, keep the distinction between God and man, which is knowing and unknowing, fallible and infallible.
Yeah.
And every time someone's ever landed on something like Christ was this, or Christ was not this, Mary was this, it's always heresy every time they land on something.
Yeah.
I feel like the entire pursuit of knowledge may be not knowing. It may be having to seek and pursue.
No, I agree. And I feel like that's the necessity of discourse. And also just the difference in Eastern and Western thought. I think it's an incredibly...
It's a black line, a very, very black line, bro.
Yeah, it's an incredibly Western mindset to think that you need an answer to things.
Yeah.
Like, I have a friend that, he's a big runner. And he went on a trip to Europe last summer. And while he was there, he met this lady who was out for a swim. And he was like, "You look great. Like, how much do you swim every day?" And she was like, "I swim until I'm tired." And like, knowing that your body's just going to tell you. Yet in the West, like, our thought process is like, I need to swim like 2 kilometers a day, like every day, to be fit and to be healthy, instead of like, my body will tell me when I'm tired. In the same way that like Descartes makes this entire argument around what can be solid, and then continues to say, I actually don't know anything, and then explains what a blood vessel does for 10 pages.
For an entire thing.
It doesn't make any sense. But like the Western mindset is to say I need things to be concrete.
Yeah.
And even like just modern thought, I feel like part of that, though, is the spread of Western ideology. Like, because, I mean, you know, Aristotle, Plato, like, all of these people, like, had no concept of, like, Western thought.
Bro, they weren't even thinking about anything like that.
Yeah, like, they didn't know how big the ocean was. They didn't, like, you know, none of that stuff existed to them. And therefore, the West of, like, I will find monetary value, I will find what I need, I will find the next thing, has spread globally, and therefore Western thought is rapidly spreading, which is like inherently different, I feel, than Descartes' method of thought, which honestly just, everything kind of circles back to Descartes' contradictions.
Yeah.
Just because, like, he presents things as solid ideals, and yet presents nothing solid.
I think the pursuit was earnest though. Yeah. I definitely like. I have to give props where I see them, and I think that the entire concept of the Discourse on Method, like him saying, "I feel dissatisfied or unfulfilled with institutional learning," and the second he was old enough, I think he was like 23, 24, which is like around where I'm at now, which is mind-boggling, but around 23, 24, he said, I'm gonna like, I think he joined the military. Yeah. I'm gonna go travel the world and like test my reasoning on the move. Like really like actively try and learn away from my teachers, try and reason myself.
Yeah.
That itself to me is super valiant. And then he comes to a position to where it's like, as much as I feel it to be contradictory in nature, but still very like solid in certain ways, maybe through the individual lens. But I think therefore I am reconciling on that after leaving institutional learning and saying, all I can know for certain is I am thinking. To me, that's like, he's special to me. I've read so much epistemology recently because, I mean, I have an entire like lifetime thesis I'm trying to like research for. All my reads kind of point to a certain topic. We can get to that another day though. Yeah. But epistemology to me is so fascinating. And Descartes, like I have like 4 copies of Discourse on Method. I have like 6 copies of his meditations. Like Descartes to me is so fascinating for what he tried. No one's tried to do that before. Because I know, like I think it's part 2 or part 3 where the maxim, where he was talking about, or list of maxims, where he was saying that whenever you go build a new house, you don't break your old one until the new one's built. So he needs to have like a safe haven in his mind to where I'm about to break down every thought I've ever had and come down to the actual roots of all of my trees in my mind. And the maxims that he laid out to do so was, I'm going to abide by the religion and social constructs of what's outside so no one questions me. And he did that because, remember, I think Galileo's in the same time period he's in. And he had the entire thing with the Inquisition to where he was saying, no, the Earth is actually not the middle and it orbits the sun. They killed him for that. They tried to kill him for that. Like, so he was like, that's not gonna happen to me. I'm gonna question everything, but I'm going to live socially and be fine. And then he was also saying that the second I feel any certainty in my mind, even though it's false certainty, stick with that and walk through it. I think he gave the analogy of like whenever you're in a forest, you walk straight until you reach the end. You don't try and just meander around because you won't get out of the forest. Yeah. So like, I think the entire concept of having these preventative measures to where in society I'll act this way, in my mind I'll treat thoughts this way. Like he had a whole system in his mind for like thought and like progressing and learning and like. Yeah. Dude, Descartes to me is fascinating. One of my favorite writers of all time. Like, even though he's contradictory, but like he's so cool.
Well, like we say this, but at the same time, like we'll probably publish it at some point, but we had a whole conversation about the Trinity for like a long time and the person of God, in which we just contradicted ourselves over and over. The entire time, over and over. And like that's the process of thought. And in the same way, like I mean, we weren't going to talk about it, but I do feel that it's necessary to like also bring up like the most straightforward place that we see Descartes' idea on actual discourses in his meditations. Yep. In which like literally thinks about the being of God being around him all the time, and then is like, okay, what if it's the opposite? Mm-hmm. And what if there's like a demon over my shoulder all the time? Descartes' demon. And like, what does that change? How does that change how I act and how I interact?
Like, I feel like Descartes' demon is another fascinating concept. We can touch on it for a little bit while we're here. I mean, we're already here now. But Descartes' demons is fascinating because, like, it comes to the idea of almost like surveillance and how that, like, links with, like, you know, actions, how you actually act. I know, like, we talked about him earlier, but it all kind of, the French philosophers. But Foucault talks about I always forget how to say the word, but it's like panspermia, something like that. We'll put it up on the thing. But basically, like, in a prison, in the middle of the prison, there's like a room with a bunch of mirrors or something. Yeah. To where like one person can see 360 degrees at one time.
Yeah.
Because he looks around, he sees the mirrors for everyone in the prison. That's like it's in a circle.
Yeah.
And it really reminded me of Descartes because it was like, what if you had someone around you at all times, and how would that change? Because let's presuppose that being or the entity around you is all knowing and knows what you're thinking. Would you think differently? Would you act certain ways differently?
Yeah.
Like, let's say you had Jesus or whatever deity you believe in around you at all times. You would try and think holier thoughts. You would try and do holier things. You would try and... It just really gets to the fact of, like, it's just it all comes back to just a fallible man.
It reminds me of, like, there's this Paul McCartney interview.
Paul McCartney,
and they're like, we heard that you let this, like, random homeless guy into your studio for a whole day. Like, why'd you do that? And he was like, he told me he was Jesus.
He told me he was Jesus.
I wasn't going to take the chance.
Bro, I can't lie. We're kind of off topic, but there's a...
He's real for that.
There's a song on To Pimp a Butterfly by Kendrick, How Much a Dollar Costs. And it talks about like a homeless person asking the narrator or Kendrick for $1, and he says no the entire time.
Yeah.
And then the last verse, he tells him, like, I'm actually God. And, like, when I heard it the first time, it reminded me of all the stories of, like, you know, in the Bacchae, I think it's called, where in Greek mythology Dionysus dresses up and, like, they don't know it's him until the very end. There's like a recurring story in, like, a bunch of mythologies and beliefs where God, the deity, comes down and they're, like, either, like, mind boggled by him, they changed how they act around him, or they, like, treat him worse not knowing he's God. And I think that's such a cool concept. There's, like, so many poems about it, so many novels about it. But I think it's also cool that it shows up everywhere as well.
Yeah.
It shows up in every mythology.
Yeah, I agree. Well, this has been Discourse on Method.
We're way off the topic now.
With the Gabe podcast.
Gabe podcast, man.
Cue the outro. Fire. Yeah, thank you guys for watching, and we'll be back probably in a week. We'll see.
Yeah, around there. Oh, we'll figure it out, man.
Yeah. All right. See you guys.
You gotta be safe.